Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to today's event on BI and reporting trends for Dynamics NAV in combination with digital transformation. We'll be looking at new data from Dynamics NAV customers and partners on both of those topics and trying to bring them together today. My name is Jason Gumpert from MSDynamicsWorld.com. I'm hosting today's event and I'm joined by Anthony Deanna of deFacto. I just want to cover a couple of details before we dive in today. We do welcome your questions and feedback during the event. You can use the Q&A block. That would be the best place to share your thoughts or questions as we move into today's event. We will be taking at least a couple of breaks to take questions, both after we've reviewed some of the survey results and after we've done a little more review of the deFacto solution later on in the event that Anthony will be presenting. So we will be moving straight into the survey results review and discussion and what it says about the NAV landscape. We'll be looking at the data as well as some unique participant feedback. And then we will be setting aside time in the second half of the hour to talk more specifically about deFacto and their CPM and financial reporting offering. So before we go any further, let me actually just take a minute to welcome Anthony Deanna to the event. Anthony, thanks for joining us. Maybe you want to do a brief introduction of yourself for the attendees.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. Hi, everybody. So my name is Anthony Deanna, COO of deFacto Global. Been with the company since we started. The product's been out about 7 years. We do a lot of work in the Dynamics space. We've been working with Dynamics for well over 10 years. And I've personally been in this corporate performance management or CPM space for the last 20 plus years, working with various products before deFacto like Hyperion, OutlookSoft, Cognos, etc. So, welcome your questions. If you want us to understand how we compare to other products as we get into the demo and things like that, certainly feel free to ask and look forward to spending the next hour with you guys. Thanks.
All right, excellent. So let's move on to start looking at the survey results that we're going to be reviewing today as a starting point. So a little background, MSDynamicsWorld ran 2 surveys for its readers aimed at Dynamics customers and partners. One was in May, which was really focused on reporting and BI and analytics topics. And then a more recent one in September that was focused primarily on themes around digital transformation. Between the two, we had over 575 responses from users and partners on the different topics. And we wanted to understand some of the basics about the maturity of where our readers are, whether they're customers or professionals, in terms of deploying, recommending, selecting different kinds of solutions to meet their needs. And we also wanted to start to get a read on what our readers felt about this concept of digital transformation. Is it just hype? Is it an idea that helps explain what's really going on in the IT landscape in terms of making investments and planning for the future? What we found in looking at the reporting specific data and the digital transformation trend feedback was that the sentiment is that there seems to really be some interesting overlap going on between the needs for reporting, the need for data management, the need for forecasting, and also this idea that the concept of digital transformation actually is a valid way of describing what's going on. So just a little bit of high-level information about the 2 surveys. So the BI and reporting survey from May, you'll see NAV participation was a little less than a quarter of the participants, but about half of the participants were customers and the other half were professionals.
Hey, Jason, I don't mean to interrupt,
and then
I don't see the slides moving, at least in my...
Oh, okay. Thank you, Anthony.
On the first slide.
I can fix that here.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Yeah, sorry about that, everybody. Yeah, and not too much. I don't think anything has been missed so far, really. Okay, and then looking at the digital transformation survey, which was the more recent one that we ran in September. Maybe some of you actually participated in it. But we asked the question a little differently. We asked about the Dynamics products of interest, which we felt was maybe a good way to do it right now, considering the sort of the flux and the new product introduction that's coming online right now here in November. You can see that over 35% of participants said that that NAV is a product of interest for them, and also you'll notice a little further over to the right on that left-hand chart, Dynamics 365 for Business is actually of interest to over 15% of those respondents. So again, depending on who you are in the NAV space, again, probably potentially relevant for some of you as well. The role distribution over on the right there was a little different for the digital transformation survey. About a third of the participants were customers, then about half, and then about others were tended to be other roles in the community. Okay, so I know we've touched on this a little bit, why talk about digital transformation. I felt like the timing was right to start getting a read on this. We see clearly, obviously, with Microsoft's direction, which we follow very carefully, the vision overall is with the newest Dynamics releases and clearly with the push to bring other Microsoft technology to bear, like Power BI, Office 365, the whole range of Azure services that are relevant to Dynamics customers, that is really relevant to where we think Dynamics customers are going to be making their next decisions in terms of where to take their technology strategy. But we also were interested in looking at ways to validate that could we observe that views that reflect this general concept in our readers are things that they care about, also reflective of this concept of digital transformation in the context of ERP, Dynamics ERP and Dynamics CRM products. And then how can we tie this trend to practical and meaningful challenges that users face, like building a reporting strategy or empowering end users to get access to the right information to make decisions in their roles. And that's the area where I really want to lead into the discussion today. I think it's something that's certainly not a new theme, but I think it's one that's evolving, and as you'll see from some of the data here, I think our readers tend to agree with that. Okay, so just to start off, again, I know I said this, but is digital transformation influencing your organization? I want to put that question out there first just to show you what our readers say. And 75, or actually more than 75% of people who are interested in NAV say either yes, it is a support, an influence, or it probably is. Less than 25% say it probably isn't, or it certainly isn't. And just a couple of interesting quotes that I pulled out in response to this question from NAV customers. One noting that they hired a new executive director who really is going to have a focus on digital technology, and then another person mentioning that they see as they try to operate worldwide, they have to have digital transactions to manage things and to be efficient in that scale. Top products that are interested to NAV users as it relates to this concept. Again, we asked them what's relevant. Well, Office 365, Dynamics 365 for financials, which I actually found interesting. I think that's natural, though, considering the product is just launching, and clearly Microsoft's paying a lot of attention to it, especially considering its proximity to NAV and its close relationship, at least for now. Then Cortana Intelligence Suite, probably no surprise, given the additional importance of Power BI and some of the other tools that Microsoft's starting to build into NAV and Dynamics 365. And then Power Apps and Flow, that was the other sort of top. There were other products we asked about, but those were the clear top four, and they really fell off after that. Power Apps and Flow actually just went into general availability this week, so certainly an interesting time for that as well. Okay, so I guess, and I want to bring Anthony in here. We asked, where does digital transformation actually matter in terms of your concerns related to solutions? How do you incorporate it into how do you incorporate this concept into these needs that you have? And Anthony, I want to bring you in here. Obviously, you hear analysts talk about some of these themes: user adoption, process standardization and automation, redesign, reporting and analytics, which is obviously on this list. When you see a list of the kind of things that our readers tell us that they are thinking about and that matter to them, do you have any thoughts on sort of how, or did anything about this list sort of surprise you in terms of the priorities that NAV users are talking about?
Well, what I'll say is I know you and I have talked a lot in the past few days about the digital transformation piece, and I think with other products, reporting analytics has been kind of at the top of the list. So the fact that that's third is a little surprising, but when I look at the list here, when I look at the top four especially, I see those really grouped together as one in a sense, because they all kind of are interrelated. In order for you to have good reporting, you need to have user adoption around that. You need to be able to bring data together. You need to be able to use the existing software that you have, right? So to me, that all that's kind of interrelated. As people are looking toward the future, the concerns about things like standardizing on processes, things about the user adoption, I think become certainly more and more important. And no solution is going to be successful without user adoption. Even it's the best design solution, everything's there for me. If the users aren't using it, then there's really no success. So that certainly makes sense being at the top of the list. So I see, like I said, these things kind of, certainly the top four being fully kind of integrated as one in a sense, but it speaks to the importance of thinking about where you're going before it's too late, or before, you kind of think too tactically and try to solve these small problems here and there, and you're not thinking of the big picture. And I think by taking a step back and kind of looking at things in a more broader perspective as you move towards this digital transformation, that's going to help on all these aspects, right? Because as I implement new software, as I redesign what I have, as I install the next version of whatever's coming, I need to be able to look at things on a broader perspective and incorporate other data sources and other things to make sure that I do get the user adoption as part of that.
Sure, and let me bring up another sort of a perspective on this here. We asked how well organizations are currently meeting reporting and analytics needs. NAV customers gave us an interesting response on this. It was different from what AX or GP participants in the survey told us, I think, in terms of just the distribution of these answers. Meeting some needs but not enough really dominated. And I know, obviously, with NAV, it has its own approach to sort of in-app reporting and compared to other solutions. But so perhaps, what's one of my takeaways here, why people are meeting some needs but probably not enough. And you can see a couple of the comments we pulled. Creating more reports is of interest to one team, and then the ability to slice and dice data is where they know they need to go to create more meaningful reports. Anthony, I'd be interested to hear your perspective on our expectations changing among NAV customers. You think among the business decision makers in terms of what they should be getting out of the tools that they're using to deliver insight?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by kind of the survey here as well. I think it makes sense that it's meeting some needs but not enough. But the distribution, I think, is different from the other products. Certainly much more concentrated than the other products. The comments that I see on the right, I think, are spot on. You look at, I need the ability to kind of access my data and do more meaningful things with it, but our management is not interested in creating their own reports, right? So that speaks to the user adoption and the self-service and things like that. So The other thing I look at is when we talk to NAV customers and really any ERP customers, NAV or the ERP is just one piece of the puzzle, right? There's other data out there that you need to incorporate. So even if you, let's say, gave the best tools to NAV customers to do reporting, well, there's other data sources you need to get data from, and if you don't have tools around that, or you don't have a strategy around how to pull all that information together to make it meaningful and to get that user adoption, then again, you're not going to be successful. So what I see here is probably a lot of that. It's like, okay, I may have, tools within NAV that help me do reporting, so it's meeting some needs, but I'm not getting everything that I need, and maybe the tools aren't everything I need, but at least I'm getting something, right? And I guess that's better than nothing in a lot of cases, but certainly, there needs to be improvement on that. As technology gets better, meeting some needs but not enough is not the right answer to me. I think you need to really kind of look forward to trying to do more than that.
Yeah, and in terms of where people are looking forward, I did want to, I think that's a good lead-in for the next slide. It jumps back to a little bit of higher level in terms of asking people where they are with approaching digital transformation today, and I'm really using this as sort of a lead-in to the next slide, but in terms of, you can sort of read this from left to right, left being the most advanced or most progressive, I guess you'd say, in terms of operate as a digital business. And then as you move to the right, taking measures to change their business versus preparing versus not making any, not taking any meaningful steps right now, all the way on the right there. And this is not totally unexpected, I would say. I think I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that 40% of people are actually saying they're taking, who responded said they're actually taking measures right now to change their businesses toward more sort of digital processes, more automation. That's a number that's a little higher, I believe, than some other groups within the survey. So just worth noting there, and I bring that up as sort of a lead-in to ask to this list here about technical challenges that the NAV community says are the most concerning to them related to this concept of digital transformation. And we want to know what these challenges are. We see that NAV users are prioritizing the idea of building a technology platform above a range of other, obviously, key things, and complexity, managing complexity. Replacing legacy systems is important, which I think was a little bit unique for the NAV audience. Anthony, I throw this one back to you. How are you seeing that customers who use NAV are trying to, or ERP in general, are trying to make sense of some of these different concerns that seem to be quite common as they sort of assess their own requirements?
Well, I think you see with vendors like Microsoft, with Dynamics 365, and you see vendors like NetSuite, and they're kind of capitalizing on what you're seeing on this list here, right? Because you look at number 3. To me, that's very important. When we deal with customers, every customer is different about how the business and IT gets along, and so in many cases, the business wants to be able to manage what they're doing, and IT would be very happy for that to happen. Unfortunately, the technology tends to be a little too cumbersome for them to do that. But I think what's happening is as more customers are moving to the cloud and more moving to these, Azure or hosted or cloud-based solutions, they're allowing the business to do more and more, and there's less reliance on IT. So I do think, that those companies that are moving in that direction, that this is a good reason for that, right? Less hands-on management from an IT perspective. The planning, in a sense, is done for you, right? Because of the infrastructure and all that kind of strategic setup. You're letting the big companies like Microsoft kind of think about that for you, so you don't have to do that. So, I see the benefit in doing that. It's not going to be for everyone, or is not necessarily for everyone, but I see, that is a reason to move in that direction. But I think as companies look at, moving forward, these are going to be constant challenges because the technology is always changing, and to stay on top of that, I see complexity of design new solutions. That one jumps out at me too, because you think about an ERP system, and that's really, in a sense, pre-designed for you. Of course, you need to tweak it and organize that and work with a partner to do that. So I'm surprised that that's kind of as high on the list as it is, but I see a common theme there that people feel that it's too complex. But what I see is where these things are going are in effect, moving more to the cloud to try to simplify some of these challenges that are coming up. And again, that's not necessarily the answer for everybody, but that to me is a good reason why these companies are, like Microsoft, like NetSuite, et cetera, are making cloud offerings because of these challenges that customers are running into.
Yeah, I just share a little bit of my take on that point about complexity, because I perhaps didn't think, I was not surprised to see that near the top of the list, especially taking into account, this, what we were just looking at, which is that so many companies in the NAV space appear to already be at least taking measures to sort of, get away from paper, get away from manual processes that are create better access to their data. And I think as you adopt more systems, the risk of complexity rising, I think also the risk goes up of greater complexity. And as you start to look at all these potentially disparate, digital but potentially disparate systems, or systems that maybe aren't all pushed to, designed to go together, even if they are all in the cloud, I could see that lending itself to more complexity. As you then think about, okay, now I have to bring this data together and make sense of it holistically.
Yep, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, that's, to me, gets back to what I was saying before, was that, although a lot of your data will be in NAV or whatever ERP you have, all your data is not going to be in there, and that's going to raise the complexity that you're mentioning here, and trying to pull that data together to make it meaningful.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and I'd be interested to hear what anyone in the audience thinks about this, but I think even as, NAV itself changes the model through which people create customizations. I know the old model's not going away, but I think even that in and of itself presents new challenges on how reporting will be impacted if you're going to be adding, additional functionality to NAV through that model and capturing data. Probably a topic for a whole nother webcast, but yeah, and I guess to segue a bit here, the idea of complexity and the idea of that growing sort of footprint also makes me wonder about how partners are playing a role in advising NAV customers, and what that role of customers will look like potentially even in the future. Being focused on just NAV, as you said, Anthony, is not probably enough. Data lives in multiple systems, and reporting has to reflect that. So we asked, how well now your partner that manages NAV for you or deployed NAV for you is advising you on reporting and BI matters. Again, this is an interesting sort of look just based on NAV, the NAV community. About half say they're getting good advice, but a quarter say they're getting poor advice, which is much higher than we've seen with some of the other segments that we've talked about in other days. So I think that's notable that so many people say poor advice on the reporting. Was that surprising to you? And I guess maybe the second question, should partners be taking on a broader role for NAV customers these days?
Well, for me, I mean, seeing that half of the customers feel they're getting good advice, that's great. Of course, on the flip side of that, that a quarter are getting poor advice. That means, in my mind, that they tried something and it failed, or it's not living up to what they expected it was going to be. So that's a little disheartening that people are getting bad advice out there. And what I've seen from partners that we work with, or that we've seen with other customers, is that, and this goes back to your question, is, should they be taking on broader roles? I think it depends. I think like anything else in life, you kind of got to know what your strengths are and what they're not. And just because you think you know BI or you know reporting or it doesn't mean you do. So, as a partner, I want to see partners who recognize their strengths. Maybe they're really good NAV implementers, but they recognize, hey, you know what? I don't know how to create a data warehouse, or I don't know how to really do BI, but I can recommend people to help me do that they partner with, and recognize where their strengths and weaknesses are to pull in, the people they need to when they need help, or at least to recommend to their client, hey, listen, no, this is not my core strength. yes, this could be a financial opportunity for me to bill you on a project, but I recognize that, this is not necessarily where my strength is, and you should go looking elsewhere, or we can help you find somebody to look elsewhere, or whatever that might be. And that's where I get a little concerned is, that partners are kind of going outside the comfort zone at the risk of a customer. I want to see partners really playing to their strengths and recognizing that and bringing the right people in at the right time. And that's not just for reporting, that's for everything, but obviously the topic of what we're talking about right now is specifically around reporting.
Sure, and I want to bring in a little partner perspective here when we asked when their clients prefer to implement BI and reporting capabilities. And I mean, you can see the clear winner here is that during a later phase, sort of after the initial deployment. Probably not a surprise to you, but I think maybe that also reflects on people's sentiment about how well their partners advise them if they either didn't, I don't know, maybe you can give your perspective if they either didn't reach that state and actually get into executing a second stage, or perhaps got distracted by other other priorities.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great and informative slide. I really like this one. What I find interesting here is the last point is like, how do you not have reporting, right? I just don't see how it's even possible. Granted, it's a lower percentage, but how is that even possible? Fine, maybe not BI, but reporting, you need reporting out of your ERP system. But on the larger scale there, where we're seeing 70% doing it in a later phase, that to me makes sense. And I see this so many times where people get mesmerized by the technology, but they don't realize what it takes to get that technology to be useful. And what I mean by that is, I'll be at, Envision or Convergence or at Summit, and you'll see somebody walking around, they'll say, oh, a dashboard, and they're like, oh, they're so excited they see this dashboard, and they think it's really cool, and you can do this drill down, and, the graphics are really nice. And so they wind up focusing on the tool, but they don't focus on what they need to do to get there, right? And in order to get there, you need to have your data model in place, you need to answer all those questions up front and then implement that. And until all that data is in place, all those checks and balances are in place, security is in place, right? The data governance is in place, all those things, unless that's there, the dashboard is really meaningless. So to me, it should happen at a later phase. But what's happening, I do think certain aspects of reporting needs to happen sooner than later. But the more the BI kind of things, make sense to come later in the process. But to me, the one point that I'd like to make out here is that there's still a strategy around that. You still need to, before you implement your ERP system, you still need strategically to understand how is this going to play into my overall reporting and BI efforts going forward, right? I still need to think about that. So although I may not be implementing it in phase one, I need to understand what phase one is going to do to impact how I'm going to go to BI or reporting down the line. So to me, that's where partners really need to understand is planning, working with their customers to plan for the future, to say, okay, yeah, in the next 6 months as we implement your ERP upgrade or whatever we're doing, no, we're not going to focus on BI, but once we have the blocking and tackling done, all the data now is coming in the right way, or our transactions are processing correctly. Once all that's there, then, phase two is let's get to the reporting in BI. And I don't see enough of that planning. I see good partners doing it, but when I hear customers telling me, no, we never really even thought about that again, I find very disheartening. Because to me, that's just part of what a strategy should be overall for a company that partner should be helping with.
Okay, great. With my eye on the time here, I wanted to maybe jump a little bit to the topic of Power BI just for a moment, and also get your impression. So there was some interesting data on that, and we may have shared this slide once before, but we sort of wanted to compare the views of NAV users and partners on use of Power BI as it relates to their overall reporting strategy. I think it's notable that NAV users, a higher percent say that they're actually already using Power BI than like other Dynamics ERP users, for example, just to give a little context, that adoption is higher, and this was from a few months ago. I think this potentially could have changed already in the last few months. I wouldn't be surprised if it has. But partners didn't appear to be all that optimistic. Again, a few months back here, how well can it meet the needs of the BI reporting needs of your clients? Less than 20% rated as a key component right now, but 30% say it's still too limited. Obviously, it's a product that's been evolving. But Anthony, when you step into scenarios where there's a NAV user and perhaps their primary partner looking at some of these challenges, do you pick up on that sentiment yourself?
Well, I think what tends to happen is people look at one tool to be the panacea, right? The answer to everything, and I just don't think that's really feasible. Because I think, your user community is not just one type of person, right? You have different types of users with different types of needs, and Power BI is not going to meet all of them. So I think the important thing is, to look at Power BI as a part of your strategy, but still understand what that strategy is. And so when we work with customers, or we see successful customers, the data platform is really what's important. Building that data model where I can access that data however I want is, to me, what's most important. And what I mean by that is, if I have this data model and I can hit that using Power BI, or I can hit it using a Power BI competitor like a Tableau or something like that, or in a lot of cases, we're dealing with financial users, they're living in Excel, right? They need the ability to interact with Excel, not just download some report, cut and paste it into Excel, but actually interact with the data in Excel. That's what's most important. Now, if I have a data model that's consistent, that I can hit using different tools, including Excel and Power BI, then that to me is, great strategy going forward, because as technology changes, new products come out, I'm sure Microsoft will continue to evolve Power BI and make it more robust. You still need the data model there. It gets back to my point earlier about the tool is nice, but unless your data is set up and in place, then the tool really doesn't matter. So I want to know that if my user's hitting it with Power BI and looking, let's say, at a revenue or cost or units number, and I'm running a report in Excel and interacting with that data and drilling down, I'm seeing that same number regardless of what I'm doing, because I'm hitting that consistent data model. But I want to give my users the ability to choose what they're most comfortable with. And yeah, maybe, I'm not going to endorse 50 products, because that's just hard for IT to manage, but I'm going to say, well, you want dashboarding, go this route. You want Excel, go this route, but we're going to use a common data model around that and give our users options around that for where they're comfortable in working with the data.
All right, excellent. Well, with that, I would love to take any questions that people have after seeing some of these different points, or even just observations. It would be great to hear a little feedback. I also want to transition now to the second portion of our presentation, where I'm going to actually give you control, Anthony, and you can tell us a little more about deFacto and your approach, your presenter, and your solution, your views on how to approach some of these challenges.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. Let me just share my screen here. There it goes.
And I should note we'll save a few minutes at the end for questions as well.
All right. Perfect. Okay. Well, thanks, Jason. So I wanted to talk a little bit about deFacto planning. deFacto Global is the company. deFacto Planning is the only product that we sell, and it is a fully integrated reporting, budgeting, planning, and forecasting solution. So a lot of our customers use it for reporting on NAV, but you can bring in other data sources as well. So when we talk about this kind of common data platform or common data model, deFacto allows you to bring that data all together in one place and then have a standardized way of looking at your data. The other nice thing too is, as you're bringing in your actuals and so forth, you can also do your budgeting and your forecasting and so forth within deFacto. And I'll show you that as we get to the demo. The company, as I mentioned, the product's been out about 7 years. The architects behind deFacto built Hyperion Enterprise, built OutlookSoft, so we've had a lot of space, a lot of experience in this, what we call corporate performance management space. And we call it that because it really does go beyond reporting, beyond BI, because it incorporates things like the budgeting, planning, forecasting. It incorporates things like consolidation, intercompany eliminations, all sorts of business logic, for things like foreign currency, allocations, partial ownerships, all those kinds of things can be done within the deFacto engine. So if we look at how deFacto is positioned in the market, this is a study done by BPM Partners, which is an analyst specifically around the business or corporate performance management space. And you can see, I'm sure there's some names here you recognize. Some of them play in the dynamic space, some of them don't, but I'm sure you've run into them in the past. And you can see that deFacto is very well positioned here as far as functionality goes. We're not the biggest guys out there. We only have, 2 or 250 customers, but all of our customers are using all aspects of deFacto. And so because we don't have thousands of customers, that's why we're not kind of listed on the right side here, but that's really the only thing that's differentiating the left to the right. But the most important thing here in my mind is we have a substantial customer base and we have the highest customer satisfaction of any of our competitors. And if you look at kind of the big three that we may compete against in some cases, the Cognosis and the Hyperions and the business objects of the world, you can see that their customer sat is really, really low. And so deFacto really prides itself on that. And one point that I'll make is that we've never had a customer leave deFacto. We've replaced just about every vendor that's out there in the space, from Cognos to Hyperion to Solver to Getic. Any of these products we've replaced over time, but we have never been replaced by a customer. So we see our customers as not something that you buy this for a year. I mean, you're buying it for a lifetime in a sense, because it's providing you value for a lifetime. And as your company changes, as your needs change, deFacto is going to be part of that and allow you to do the things that you need to do. Okay, we do have a centralized data model. We have connectors for NAV as well as the other flavors of Dynamics, but you can bring in data from other data sources as well. So if you have a lot of our customers that are larger, maybe multinational companies, they'll bring in, they may have NAV in the U.S. and they may have, AX in Europe. And so what they'll do is they'll bring that data together in deFacto, and deFacto will consolidate that data for them to get their consolidated reporting. So that's one of the benefits of deFacto, is enabling you to do that. And what's nice about that too is if you're implementing a new ERP system, as you turn off each company in the old ERP system and move them to the new, you can still consolidate all that information in deFacto and be able to get consolidated reporting out as part of that process. One other capability of deFacto is we do have a built-in integration with the Azure machine learning platform. So we worked with Microsoft closely to build this capability where you can take your actual data from deFacto, share that with the Azure machine learning model, teach that model about your business, and then generate a predictive forecast for your business, and bring that right back into deFacto as just another scenario for reporting purposes. So something that's really powerful around this predictive forecasting, and it enables you to compare your actuals to your standard forecast or budget to your predictive forecast to understand better where your company is going. And then what we're seeing is a lot of companies moving or trying to move to that direction where instead of having 100 people kind of entering data from a forecasting perspective, they can take it a step further and really just press a button and generate a forecast. And I know Microsoft uses this internally for things like Xbox sales, and they've actually proven that it can be more effective and more accurate in providing forecasts than just people entering their manual forecasts. So pretty interesting, and something that we're seeing a lot more interest in, and we're starting a number of pilots with our customers on. From a technology standpoint, we use both the relational database of SQL Server, and we use analysis services, Cube technology, and we manage all that for you. So you don't need to really be an expert in that. So when we were talking earlier about the kind of IT and business, how they get along, one of the benefits of deFacto is it's, if you look across our customer base, it's almost always a business or financial analyst that becomes the administrator of the application, because we've made it so easy to manage. So you don't really need to know anything about these technologies. We manage all that for you, And the reason why we use both of these is that they're each good at certain things. So if I think about that great speed of thought reporting, that drill down, that instantaneous response time, that's where the cube really comes in. It allows me to scale my data really well as part of that as well. But if I think of some of those procedural calculations like allocations, like the multi-currency, like the partial ownerships, things like that, the cube would be really poor at doing that, but the relational database much better at doing that. And so, again, those are things we manage for you to allow you for very sophisticated calculations and allocations and so forth. Our focus from day one, from an interface perspective, has been Excel, right? We're focused on the CFO organization. Most of those users are in Excel 10, 12, 14 hours a day. We didn't want to take away from that. So we wanted to really build the best Excel interface possible so that you're truly interfacing with Excel. It's not just, dumping data or exporting data and then using pivot tables. You're literally using Excel as a window to your data. And that's not only from a reporting standpoint, it's also from a budgeting and planning standpoint, which we'll show a little bit in the demo. But as I mentioned before, I think that common data platform where we're using analysis services allows tools like Power BI to natively connect to deFacto. So without having to do anything except create a dashboard. Even the security is proliferated back out to Power BI as well. So that's the important thing. And again, that talks to that single version of the truth, regardless of what tool that you're using, you have the ability to take advantage of deFacto, whether it's through Power BI, through Excel, or through deFacto's own web and mobile interfaces, because we have our own as well. They're not as robust from a dashboarding standpoint as like a Power BI, because we're letting Microsoft make that investment. They're going to have a lot more money than we do to build the best kind of BI interface possible, but we're going to build our own tools so that you can report in Excel or the web or on your phone or tablet and things like that. And that's what we do. So one of the things you'll notice also, I think that's important about deFacto is the ability to model your data. NAV, like every other ERP system, was designed for transaction processing, the collection of data at that level of detail, right? And that's what it's good at. And that's why you bought it, that's why you implemented it. However, that's not necessarily how customers, especially senior management, makes decisions in a company. They're not looking at each transaction, they're looking at a summarized view of their business, right? And they need to be able to organize that in a way that's meaningful to them, regardless of how the ERP is organized. And so that's what deFacto allows you to do, is that take that data and then model that in a way that's more meaningful to how your company makes decisions. And when I think about modeling, you could think about, what if as an example. What if I wanted to make an acquisition? What if I wanted to divest the business? What if I wanted to spin up a new product? What if I hired a new general manager and I wanted to look at what a pro forma reorg might look like, right? These are all good reasons to model my business, especially as I'm planning for the future, right? So here's my business today, and it's like, well, I know 2 years from now we're looking to expand into Canada, and I want to see what impact that's going to have on my business. So I want to be able to do some of those things, but to try to do that in an ERP system would be impossible. And so what do you wind up doing? You start modeling it in Excel, and then it's only in that worksheet, and it's only the person who's creating that worksheet that has access to it, unless you're emailing these things around. So having deFacto enabling you to model your data, to kind of drag and drop where things go and have all the history go with it, makes life a lot easier, and then you can really truly model your business. And then the nice thing is I can then analyze what that model looks like, and then I can plan around it. And so deFacto allows for these things to happen, and it happens on an ongoing basis, right? It's not just a one-time effort. It's something that is going to happen month after month, year after year. Some things you're going to know about, and 3 years from now, something might happen. You have no idea that you could have anticipated it, right? But the modeling allows you to react quickly to help handle those types of situations. Okay, this is just an overall list of some of the functionality that's built into deFacto. It is by no means comprehensive, but I just wanted to give you a feel for some of the things that are there for you. You don't need to use all of it, of course, but if you wanted to use it, it's all there for you when you're ready. So these are just built-in features of deFacto that make our customers very happy. Okay. All right. So let's jump out to the demo and give you a feel for what we're looking at here. There it is. Okay. So we're going to look at Excel, and what you'll see here is that in Excel I have my deFacto ribbon. So this is the only interface you'll see from deFacto. And on the left side of this line here, I have the different functionality of deFacto, and then on the right side of this line is where my dimensions lie within my model. Now, you can see here I have about 10 dimensions. You can have as many dimensions as you need. You can call them whatever you like. You can name them whatever you like, organize them however you like. And so if I pull up a dimension, you'll see that it's very hierarchical in nature, right? I can easily view, here's my chart of accounts, and I can build these hierarchies in however I want. So that's what's really nice as well. I don't have to do this at a report level or build formulas in Excel. I can let deFacto do all these calculations for me. And what I mean by that is, if I look here, I can look at cost of goods, and you can see I have a property of account type that's an expense. I have total revenue, that's an income account, and then I have gross margin, that's an income account. And so what deFacto is doing is it's saying revenue minus cost of goods equal gross margin just by looking at the account type. So I don't need to build a lot of formulas in deFacto because my hierarchy with the financial intelligence will do that for me automatically. So it just makes life a lot easier, not only to manage, but it also takes away the need to put a bunch of formulas in Excel that I could potentially fat finger and screw something up, right? We're trying to avoid that. Now, the other thing I want to show you is when I look at, let's say, like a company dimension, here's an example of a regional roll-up of my data, right? So New York and Boston roll to the east, to the U.S., and so forth. And this is what we call our management organization. Well, when we talk about modeling and the ability to look at things in different ways, here's a good example of that. If I change this to my functional organization, you're going to see I'm going to take the same core data, right, the LE 14 and 15, and I'm going to reorganize that, right? So here, now I have my business looking at it from a sales and G&A perspective, and now New York is rolling up to sales, and Boston is rolling up to G&A. So I can build these alternate hierarchies on any dimension, and I can see different ways to view my business. So if I'm doing a reorg of my business and I want to see that pro forma view, I would just build an alternate hierarchy to do that and see what the impact of that would be. And that doesn't replicate any data. It's allowing me to just kind of repoint my data for this hierarchy to see what that impact would be. And I'm able to do that in the same model, and I'm able to view these hierarchies side by side to see what the impact of those things might be. So just some examples of that. So let's look at some reporting just to get a feel for this. So I'm going to open up an ad hoc report here because I want you to see what this looks like. And what this is doing is it's basically saying whatever I choose in my current view, so here gross margin, right, because I have my account dimension here. I want gross margin. I want to drill down or expand 5 levels deep, right, and that's what this is doing here. Same thing on time. I have the current year, right, which is made up of the quarters and the months. Whoops. Right? And what I'm looking at here is it's showing me go 5 levels deep on whatever I choose in my current year. If I wanted to see quarterly data, I could just say show parents, and all of a sudden the quarterly data pops up. If I want to zero suppress my data, I can zero suppress my data. If I want to go down to, let's say, pre-tax income, right, I go to pre-tax income, and you'll see this all expand all the way down here. Now, what's happening here is first you can see the speed in which this is happening. With each change that I'm making, deFacto is requerying that data. It's not hiding and unhiding rows or columns or anything like that. It's requerying that data, but it's bringing back the data almost instantaneously. The other thing it's doing when it brings data back from deFacto, it is just bringing a value back. Even if it's a roll-up, there's no formulas in here. Because again, we're letting the calculations occur in deFacto, and then we're just taking advantage of them in Excel. Now, we can use Excel formulas if we wanted, but because we've already defined that in deFacto, it doesn't create a need to do that inside of Excel. Additionally, what it's doing here, it's drilling down, right, from the pre-tax income. This is what we call an expansion. And the nice thing about it is you can see all the formatting that occurs is formatting correctly using Excel formatting and conditional formatting. So that if a new account were added between fringe and payroll taxes, the next time I refresh this report, it would show up here automatically and be formatted correctly. Okay, so that's the other nice thing is it's where we're creating zero maintenance reports inside of deFacto. Now this one ad hoc report is one that works with any model inside deFacto. I just want you to see how flexible it is, right? So right now I'm looking at a trend income statement, and I said, you know what, I want to see a consolidated income statement. That's a pretty standard request. So I'm going to change this to entity. And now I can see all my entities down to the lowest level. If I just wanted to look at this just for Europe, let's say, I change it for Europe and I refresh, Now I'm looking at just European data. If I only wanted to go down maybe one level as opposed to 5, right? Now I can see here's the UK, etc. If I wanted to view pre-tax, let's say gross margin by product, right? Here I have a car manufacturer. I simply change this to product, and now I'm looking at gross margin by product by location. That simply. If I wanted to look at next year's budget as opposed to this year's actual, same thing. I just change this to next year, change this scenario to budget, and you can see you can have as many scenarios as you like. And then I can refresh my data, and I'm looking at next year's budget, right? So it's really that easy. And just this one report literally has millions of combinations of things that you can do with it. Now, if I wanted to create a book of reports, that's pretty standard as well. So here I'm going to open up a book template, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change some of these things back to actual. And this is typically a monthly type report, so what I want to do is change this to, let's say, May. And instead of Europe, I'm going to go back to worldwide. Now what's happening is when I refresh this report, you can see it refreshes again almost instantaneously. But what's actually happened, it's refreshing 5 reports in this book at the same time. So that's how quick it is. Now what I'm looking at here is kind of a standard view of what our customers like to do. They look at current month versus budget, dollar and percent. They look at year to date, they look versus last year. You know, you can have any column set you want, you can have any formatting you want. It is Excel, so you get full formatting capabilities, the colors, all that, of course, can change. Okay? If I change this from May, from May to, let's say, June, because the month has changed, you'll see all this refreshes for me. And as I mentioned, in that amount of time, it's refreshed 5 reports. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm bringing back the values from deFacto. Even my actual versus budget is a formula inside deFacto, so it's doing that calculation for me. And it's an intelligent formula because what it's doing is it's looking at that account type and saying, oh, if it's an income account, then if it's higher, then that's better, and it'll show as a positive. If it's an expense account and it's higher, then I want to show it as a negative, right? And so it's a better worse calculation, not an increase-decrease, although you could do either. But the point is here, you can also see I can use Excel formulas as well, right? And as I change my data, if I change this from the U.S. or from worldwide to the U.S., watch my rows here. I'm going to have much fewer rows, but my formula stays with my data, right? Same thing when I expand back again. If I go back to worldwide, I'm going to have more rows, and my formulas will stay with my data. Okay, so just showing you how deFacto and Excel get along very, very, very well. Now, if I look at these reports here, I can see here's, gross margin report. Then I have a unit sales report, so it's just showing by product the number of sales with the same column set. Here I'm doing an income statement with below the line items like FTE and IT licenses and things like that, right? So all that's coming here with the same column and row set. And then I have trend reports. So here's a monthly trend on sales, and here's a monthly trend on my income statement. Now, the nice thing about deFacto is any value in any report is drillable. So I can right-click on any value, say investigate, and it allows me to drill down on any dimension here. So if I want to see all the locations that make up that $33.9 million, I just say give me everything sorted in descending order. I could do a top 10 or top 20, whatever I want. I say okay, and just like that, it gives me all that detail underneath it. Okay, and I can keep drilling down as part of that, right? So if I said give me all the details behind that, right, for the product, it allows me to drill further, and I could even drill back to NAV or to another data source, right? So I can drill out to my transactional data, and what it will do, it's going to pass the value of what's in there and then bring back the details here to the point where I'm seeing the transactional data, including any unstructured data like the invoice itself that I can bring back from deFacto. From NAV. So it allows you to do this full circle analysis in one fell swoop without having to jump from system to system. Okay, lastly, I just want to show you quickly how to do a budget because it's the same exact thing. So I'm going to open up this report here, and you can see we can use Excel charting. All that is dynamic. If I change this to the U.S. and I update my data, right, you'll see my charts change. If I go to New York, in this case, I don't have any budget data, and that's what I want to enter. And you can see I have workflow capabilities for approvals and so forth, and we don't have time to get into that today, but you can see I can do those kinds of things. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to enter data for New York. So I hit plan, and it opens up a template. And this is where it's different than most of our customers are used to, because they're used to emailing these templates around, right, and then getting them back at corporate, and then having to consolidate them and all those kinds of things. So deFacto, I can simply enter a value. I can use an Excel formula, right? I can put in a comment. And instead of emailing it, I simply say send data. And what it's doing is it's writing that data back to the database. It's consolidating up all levels. So although I'm entering for New York, it's going to do this for the East, the US, worldwide automatically. You can see here I don't have any formulas because it's letting deFacto calculate all these values for me as part of that. And the best part about it is it's all auditable. So I can right-click any value here. I could say audit log info, and I can see who entered what value, right? Here's the 3893 today at 12:55 Eastern, and the administrator entered that value. So I can see exactly what happened and at what time. Now you can get much more sophisticated with the budgeting. We have full HR planning and things like that, which we don't have time to get into today, but all that's available as part of deFacto as well. So you can get really, really sophisticated with things like business logic, like allocations and so forth. But we only have a few minutes left, so I'm just going to kind of stop things right there and circle back here with Jason.
All right. Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, and let me actually I'm going to put up a quick form if anyone does want to ask for or see more details. Obviously, I'm sure Anthony's happy and his team are happy to do that. I'll put up a form shortly on that. I do want to encourage folks to ask questions if they haven't already. We do have a couple minutes left here. Anthony, one of the questions that came in, I'm not sure if you want to take this one on directly, but sort of asking about comparison to other solutions out there for reporting and BI needs in the NAV space.
Sure. Is there anyone in particular that you're looking at, or?
Yeah, so one person asks about the differences from JET reports.
So JET, first of all, JET won't, well, we take two different approaches to the market, and I think JET and Solver kind of take a similar approach. So if you're looking just for a NAV report writer, right, where I'm going directly against the NAV data, then JET or Solver can do those kinds of things. I mean, although customers buy deFacto to do that, that's not normally why they're buying deFacto. Because deFacto brings in the data into its own data store, it allows you to do the budgeting and forecasting, the business logic and so forth. It goes well beyond just a report writer. When I look at a JET or a Solver, it's enabling me to go away from an FRX or an MR and give me an Excel-based report writer against my NAV data. So it's a little different approach. Again, I think we're much more strategic because we're able to bring in other data sources. We're able to do much more sophisticated things like the budgeting planning, like the advanced business logic and so forth. So that's really where we differ, is just kind of an Excel-based report writer versus a full CPM, corporate performance management suite. I know that was a quick answer. If you want, I could certainly talk in more detail about it if you'd like to reach out to me as well.
All right. A couple other folks just saying they like what they're seeing, but I'm not seeing any other questions right now. So let's just make a final call there. Let me also put up your contact information, Anthony. I want to remind folks there'll also be a brief.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jason. It says someone says this looks like a lot like Hyperion. I just want to kind of answer that. It's not really a question, but as I mentioned, the architects behind deFacto built Hyperion Enterprise, so there might be some similarities there. The difference between deFacto and Hyperion is that with Hyperion, you do need to buy Hyperion S-Base, Hyperion Planning, Hyperion Financial Management, and FDM, which is their integration tool, to get the same functionality as you get with deFacto. And any one of those products is a multiple cost-wise of what deFacto costs. So it looks a lot like Hyperion. It probably outperforms Hyperion in a lot of cases, but it's going to cost you a fraction of what Hyperion can do. And personally, I spent 15 years implementing Hyperion solutions, so I know the products very, very well.
All right, excellent. We have a quick poll that will come up after we end today. We really appreciate any feedback you can provide, letting us know what you thought of today's format and the information we provided. Anthony, thanks so much for taking the time. It was a lot of fun chatting with you on this topic today and some of the other reporting sessions we've been doing this week.
Same here, Jason. Thank you for the time. Thanks, everyone, for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for your attention today. Thanks for the questions. And with that, we're going to wrap up today's event. Have a great day, everybody.